waiting to see if it ticks back to like 1 again, like it has been doing. But it looks like we're fine.
Good.
Yep. This is like so far the most domesticated open we've had. We're not jumping into the middle of a conversation or being weird.
Do you want us to?
No, we're proper businessmen this time.
I don't want to be a businessman.
A businessman. Anyway, hi everyone. My name is Corey, and with me is Dylan and John. Together we're the Smark Avengers, and I didn't have anything witty to say that time about it, and I don't even know if the other stuff's been that witty, but here we are. So, we have been doing a lot of X-Men content recently on the show. So why ruin a good thing? We're going to keep on keeping on. And we're going to continue on our series of reviewing the original core X-Men team individually. So a little over a year ago, we started this out with Beast and Angel. About a month or two ago, we did Iceman, and that leaves the final 2 members of the original X-Men unit, perhaps the most interesting members of the original X-Men unit, and the 2 that are, I will say, unfortunately, in my personal opinion, attached at the fucking hip. And that is Cyclops and Jean Grey. So today we're just going to focus on Cyclops. First off, John, what's your movie count at right now?
Oh, I think I just hit 310. Let me double check. I think it was, yes, 310.
Well done. I know that you said this last one was a rough one, though.
Yeah, it was a movie called Mafia Mama, which came out last year.
With who?
It stars Toni Collette, and she was like a producer and heavily involved in the making of it. But she maybe could have done a better job because it was awful.
So when we have talked about Beast, we focused on the more recent stuff they'd been doing with him, where they made him evil. We focused on Angel. We talked about the reoccurring storyline where they're always flipping him to Archangel, and he struggles with that side of himself. And with Iceman, we just focused on the fact that he's kind of uninteresting for the most part, despite like being incredibly popular. It still throws me the fuck off how so many people love that character, but he is just so boring. And today we're going to talk about the guy who is the consummate leader of the X-Men. Even when he's not, it feels like he is, and that is our boy Cyclops. So before we really dive in, do you guys have any thoughts on Cyclops that you would like to just go ahead and get out of the way?
Not really. I think I talked about Cyclops in our like overrated characters.
Yes.
Where I thought that Cyclops is overrated. So
yes.
that's what I think about him. I think that like they could have. It seems weird that they keep going with this one guy, and like he's not. I don't think he's that interesting to be always the leader of the X-Men. You know. And sometimes they try to shake it up, but I don't know if it. We'll probably hear about some of the shakeups, but I don't know if they're good. You know, but that's just me and my wacky opinions. So what do I know? You know,
John, do you?
I mean, as a kid, Cyclops wasn't my favorite character by a long shot.
It was a long shot.
It's an X-Men joke.
There you go. But I'll be honest, like over the years, I've come to appreciate him a lot more, and I think he is sort of not overrated, but rather underrated, perhaps.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, this could be interesting, I guess.
So, I've always liked Cyclops. He was one of my favorite characters, and to the point that we talked about this, and I cut it out of the last episode. But I actually dressed as Cyclops for Halloween one year when I was like 6 years old. Which was really weird because, like, I think they were... So you remember they made that pilot for the X-Men cartoon that Wolverine was Australian in?
Yes.
Dylan, are you familiar with this?
No.
The
Oh my God,
Pride
we
of the
found another-
X-Men, was it?
We have another watch along.
Yeah.
So
I like
Dylan,
how all our watch alongs, you guys have seen them when I haven't, and that's the genesis for watching them.
So Dylan, they made a pilot for an animated X-Men show that they didn't pick up, but then a few years later they picked up the X-Men cartoon that we watched. And this was the more of like the Chris Claremont run X-Men, so like Kitty Pryde and Colossus and Nightcrawler and stuff. And like the one thing I always remember from it is Wolverine is Australian for some reason.
Mhm.
Well, it's because Hugh Jackman's Australian.
But yeah, they predicted it.
Yeah, he is Wolverine. They didn't predict it.
Like
He's
a
actually
decade,
Wolverine.
like a decade or so before it happened, they predicted it.
He's actually
Um,
Wolverine. He's a real Wolverine.
Yeah, there it is. But so like they made toys for this cartoon that didn't really come out because the costume for Cyclops that I had, it had like a plastic helmet that had like the visor, and the visor would light up if you push the button on the side. And it looked like his Claremont costume, not like not like the 90s X-Men Jim Lee look.
I had that toy as well.
Hey. So yeah, I wore that in like a jumpsuit and a leather jacket, like a brown bomber jacket, and that was my Cyclops costume.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, wasn't that bad. So to get into Cyclops, we'll start at the beginning. Cyclops is credited with being the very first X-Men. Came out in 1963 in X-Men #1. He was I guess his character origins were that him and his brother, who he was separated from but would later reunite with, were in an airplane with his father and mother. The plane started to go down, and his parents strapped a parachute onto him and his brother and shoved him out of the plane. They hit the ground because the parachute caught on fire. Cyclops hit his head, and later on in life, when his powers manifested as a teenager, growing up in an orphanage, he couldn't control his eye beams because of the head trauma, or at least that's what the explanation was at the time. Real quick, like I said, Xavier found him first, used his powers to help make people forget about the accident where his powers first manifested. And here's the one piece that I don't know if it's ever been explained, or I've not been able to find it where, and the Wikipedia page doesn't mention it. Cyclops is identifiable because of the visor, where it does look like he has one eye. And he wears, when he's outside of the costume, he wears like sunglasses that have red lenses. And they're like, oh, those are ruby quartz lenses. And that's because like whenever Cyclops opens his eyes, these eye beams come out. He can't control it just whenever his eyes are open. So these sunglasses keep that from happening.
Yep.
I have a problem.
I mean, what problem could you have with sunglasses stopping crazy ass fucking laser beams?
Yeah, we all wear glasses, right?
Correct.
Mhm.
So there's like our glasses aren't just sitting directly on our eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
So is there always like a beam that's like an inch and a half beam that's just firing out of his eyes into the backs of these sunglasses
Constantly.
That's what that was my first thought. I'm like, my glasses don't sit directly on my eyeballs.
Do you think like the lenses like bounce the lasers back into his head?
Yeah.
I think he's immune to it because like he's immune to his brother's powers. But yeah, so that's blunder number one. And number two is they mentioned their glass is made out of ruby quartz.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a common mineral crystal that is used for glasses that you wear on your face.
Well,
How did he acquire this knowledge?
I think that's the point, is that people don't normally wear ruby quartz glasses because people don't normally have lasers to shoot out of their eyes.
So I know where the ruby quartz comes from.
Oh, please do. It's been bugging me because the Wikipedia articles I've been reading haven't said it.
So before Professor X found Cyclops and brought him into the school as the first student, him and Alex were in like an orphanage. They got split up. Like Alex got adopted and Cyclops got stuck there basically, where he sort of caught the eye of Mr. Sinister, who was sort of doing his experiments on mutants and like gathering all of his genetic information that he's wont to do. And yeah, he took like a shine to Cyclops and his power, and figured that like he could, him with the right match could create like the ultimate mutant, basically. So he disguised as like the owner of the orphanage, used his scientific know-how to kind of put these ruby quartz sunglasses together to help him control his eye beams.
So I know Mr. Sinister posed as the which, by the way, if you're not familiar with X-Men, the name Mr. Sinister, could you take a hazard guess and say he's a villain? Probably. Mr. Sinister was posing as the guy running the orphanage. And that's where he kind of became, super invested in Cyclops' powers and everything. So anyway, we mentioned how had the Iceman episode that Cyclops was kind of he became kind of the de facto leader of the team, because I think he was the first. So kind of initially in the X-Men run, a lot of Cyclops' characterization was sort of the leader, because they very early on were pushing the Jean Grey and Cyclops relationship and his own insecurities, because he was having to compete against Angel, who is a rich guy.
Mm-hmm.
Not the most interesting characterization you can give someone. I kind of always been of the opinion that Cyclops really didn't get a lot of his shine until Chris Claremont. But I feel like you can say that about a lot of X-Men characters.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, for as good as they are, I think X-Men was kind of a flop before Claremont got involved.
Well, there's a reason why they basically stopped making new X-Men stories for about 20 odd issues and just did reprints, is because, yeah, it was selling so badly that.
Yeah, why invest the time?
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, it was like for every, the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk and Thor and the Avengers and Captain America and everything else that, had their stamp. X-Men was the one that just didn't work for them. Which is funny, because I remember being a kid, there was a VHS tape I had that talked about like the history of the X-Men, and I remember the panel of the people discussing. They were at a table just talking about X-Men, and it was Fabian Nicieza, Scott Lobdell, Joe Quesada, and Stan Lee. And even then, as a kid, I'm like, I don't think Stan belongs at this table. Stan's involvement wasn't really that much. So it's just weird to see like Stan Lee talking about Wolverine when it's like he had nothing to do with that character at all. But so anyway, like, that's where really Cyclops started to really stand out, was in the Claremont run. Some really important storylines that happened there were, of course, Phoenix with Jean Grey and the relationship that he had with her. There was also finding out that his father was not dead, but his father had basically been sold into slavery by the Shi'ar Empire and became a space pirate instead. So that's exciting. And, eventually what happened there was Cyclops met Madeline Pryor,
Mm-hmm.
who had the misfortune of looking exactly like Jean Grey. Not to foreshadow that she's a clone of Jean Grey, but Cyclops fell in love with Madeline Pryor, and they had a kid, and that was Chris Claremont stated that it was his intention of retiring the character Cyclops, because at that point Cyclops and Storm had a sparring contest to see who would lead the X-Men, and Storm, despite not having her powers anymore, won. So this was meant to be Cyclops's ride off into the sunset. And then what happened is Jean Grey, who was previously thought to have been dead, comes back, is revealed to actually have just been in an egg in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that people leave out, is that Jean Grey was just in an egg, and that who they thought was Jean was actually just an embodiment of the cosmic entity of the Phoenix, and that the real Jean Grey was just like healing in an egg. So anyway, in a move that made Cyclops look like a total dick, finds out his ex-wife, his deceased wife, is alive, leaves his current wife and child, to reunite with her and form a new X-Men team called the X Factor, which we had discussed in the episodes previously with Angel and Beast and Iceman. So we are going to fast forward a little bit because I feel like Cyclops' development kind of happens throughout these series, because that's kind of the thing about team books. With a team book, you don't get to have too much focus on one character. It's kind of shared, and X-Men have always had a really large cast. So if I'm missing any like big storylines for Cyclops that have occurred between Claremont and then X Factor and then like the 90s, by all means, please bring it up. Because I feel like some of the more interesting stuff happens with Grant Morrison and like even Joss Whedon and stuff.
No, I concur with that. Like the 90s, there was one point in the 90s where he died briefly because, or people thought he died because Apocalypse was gathering the 12, is like 12 mutants who he could siphon the powers from and then basically put them into Nate Gray from the Age of Apocalypse and then use him as like his new vessel and be all powerful or something like that. And Cyclops ended up sacrificing himself to save Nate Gray and taking on Apocalypse's like psyche or whatever.
Yeah.
And so for a little while he was all messed up, and Jean Grey and Cable had to go and like rescue him and like separate him from Apocalypse. But
yes,
I guess that's about it.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
So we'll have to, of course, get into Cable. So Cable is his son that he had with Madeline prior. And so normal baby, had a baby with a clone, but the baby's normal. Apocalypse infects the baby with the techno-organic virus. They end up having to send the baby into the future in order to be cured. And then Cable, because it doesn't go so hot on that side. The techno-organic virus basically deteriorates part of Cable's body. He uses his telekinesis power to basically hold himself together.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a mini-series that happens where Cyclops and Jean Grey are in the future raising Cable as a kid. But it's just weird because the next time, like when they meet Cable, they don't realize that Cable is their son, and now Cyclops is like, "Oh, the last time I saw my kid, he was 12, and now he's old enough to be my dad," and he's carrying a bunch of guns and has massive shoulder pads.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a normal thing that happens in the X-Men. After that occurs, he does get married to Jean. They have a honeymoon. The honeymoon involves some fuckery with Apocalypse, which we've discussed. We go to New X-Men, which is Grant Morrison. We've talked about Grant Morrison's run and how we seem to be a big fan of the Grant Morrison run. So before this point, Cyclops has had moments of like weakness, moments of like doubt and such in the past. But I think that really gets explored with Grant, because what I like about Grant is that Grant is a big fan of taking stuff that's happened in continuity and like molding it into their run. So what we have Cyclops who's dealing with trauma, and he's growing distant from his wife Jean Grey, which leads to and she gets busy with some Phoenix nonsense. And and then he ends up seeking counsel with psychotherapy with Emma Frost that turns into a psychic love affair. So right there, we have seen Cyclops abandon. Well, okay, we're going to go back. Cyclops fell out of love with Jean Grey when she's reborn as Phoenix because he doesn't think that she's Jean Grey. And then, like, they reconcile. He proposes to her, and then she dies. So then he meets Madeline Pryor. They get married. They have a kid. Jean is found out to have been in an egg the entire time, which I guess made him correct that Phoenix was not Jean Grey. It was something else. Mm-hmm. So he leaves Madeline and his kid behind to go be with Jean. some stuff happens with Madeline. I don't know if we'll ever do a Goblin Queen episode, but it's on the table considering how strange that story is. And so Madeline dies, so he has a kid. Madeline comes back and is evil. That's the thing that occurs. We'll brush past that quickly. So he's with Jean now. His kid's in the future being Cable, and he ends up having an affair with Emma Frost, who at this point has been notoriously kind of evil, save for the Generation X run before that. So always a bit of a hot button issue with certain X-Men fans. Any thoughts on the romance that he had with Emma Frost?
I liked it. I thought that was the most interesting Cyclops had been in ages, but also he felt more human.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I think part of the problem I had with Cyclops was that a lot of the time he didn't really have like a whole lot of character. Like his character was just he was the leader of the X-Men, you know, and
Yeah,
you know, we covered the fact that he's clearly not great at relationships.
yes.
You know, that whole like running off with the clone and then deserting the clone and their child for no reason, like that's weird. Whereas this I felt like was explained well, like it made sense the way they did it. I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a really good use of Emma Frost as well.
Yeah.
You know, because it made her seem more human as well. She wasn't just like a cold-hearted bitch. Like they actually were able to do stuff with her.
She actually legitimately had feelings for
Yes.
Scott Summers.
Exactly. It wasn't just her being a manipulative bitch. Like there was stuff going on with it. And like this is very grown-up stuff to be reading in an X-Men comic. You know, which could get pretty silly a lot
Let's
of the
hear
time.
for Grant though. Grant did it again.
That's what they do. You know.
So John, what are your feelings on the Emma Frost romantic relationship?
Yeah, much the same, to be honest. I think it was like a good run over the years. Like the relationship felt like a strong core part of the X-Men books. Like especially as we'll get into this in a bit, like during the Utopia era and like when Scott starts becoming more sort of militant and things like that. Like he always had Emma there, and like it was like a good sort of like the way they bounced off each other, and the like he made her better initially, and then she kind of kept his head on straight as well when he was getting a bit more extreme later on. So yeah.
See, I'm of that opinion too, and I'm sure this will come up when we do the Jean Grey episode soon, but I've never cared for Jean Grey as a character. I've always thought she was really bland. And there's very much Saint Jean kind of thing where it's like Jean Grey is the most important, most beautiful X character that's ever existed, and she's a martyr and she should be worshipped as such. And honestly, like Emma just seemed like a better partner for Cyclops. It seemed like a lot of Cyclops's relationship was just making sure Jean was okay. And like that's not the basis of a good relationship. Like Emma would challenge him and they would disagree on things, and ultimately they would, talk things through and come to a better conclusion for it. But I never got that. I never got this is a healthy relationship from Jean and Scott. I feel like a lot of people just inherited that relationship from the initial 1960s run and then felt some sort of obligation to keep it going. So Jean ends up dying in the Grant Morrison run. So before she does die, her and Scott seem to make amends that their relationship wasn't working and that they had grown apart and that it was fine for Scott to pursue things with Emma. And then we lead into Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, which gives Scott a little bit more to go on. In that Emma, being, like I said, kind of a better partner, she helps Scott realize that it was not head trauma that was keeping him from controlling his powers, but a mental block. that he had imposed on himself. So we get Scott for the first time, like being able to use his eye beams without having to wear the glasses or anything. So that's, that's that. I'm trying to speed through this because I know there's a lot, because that's the thing about, like, with Iceman and Beast and Angel, those are characters that come and go in and out of team books. Cyclops is like the most consistently used character in X books.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to like speed run a bunch of stuff. So if at any point, if you want to talk about, something like a storyline that comes up, by all means, please jump in. Because, like, we got Civil War where Scott and the X-Men stood against the, they decided not to really get involved with Civil War because, like, the government's been fucking them around already. And at that point, the mutant population had been decimated. So, only like 2% of mutants still had their powers. And they're like, we don't want to get involved in this because, like, A, the government's always been after us. And B, there's not that many of us left. Messiah Complex, Scott plays a really big part in that because of the birth of the mutant child and organizing and orchestrating the teams to figure out, why is Bishop trying to kill this baby? And, like, we got to protect Hope and find her.
There's also the point where he started getting more hardcore as well, because he like sanctioned Wolverine to bring back X-Force.
Yeah.
And basically give them carte blanche to do whatever they need to do to like protect Hope.
Yeah, they became the Black Ops team.
Yeah. That's a good point. You can start to see like him become a more
and that was
radical.
A really unstable team too. Like that X-Force book was great. It was, the art was black ink on black fucking paper. It was hardcore. And like, it's like, oh, should we put Archangel on this team considering he like tends to like freak out when it comes to killing people? Well, I mean, we need people to kill. So put Archangel in there and we'll have him cutting off heads in no time. But yeah, I remember, I think that was one of the disagreements that Emma had with Scott, was when she found out that he had sanctioned X-Force as their Black Ops team. What else did we got? Manifest Destiny, which I think you were talking about, John, with like the Utopia stuff as well.
Where they went off to San Francisco and basically raised up Asteroid M and turned it into their own sort of mutant sanctuary, like years before Krakoa was a thing.
I think that's a thing. I think a lot of X-Men characters, whenever somebody suggests something like that, everybody just takes a moment to pause, because I always just think of Genosha. Like, hey, maybe us having our own place doesn't ever end well. Utopia seemed like it was doing okay, though, if I remember correctly.
Really? Yeah. The way I always felt like Utopia, I was like, it's not gonna last.
No, it wasn't gonna last, but at least it didn't seem as profoundly flawed as some of the other ones did.
Well, Genosha was flawed on purpose, so like,
yeah,
that was kind of the point of it. Like, it was a treacherous, sticky situation to begin with, whereas the X-Men just been like, "This is our land now. You have to recognize our sovereignty or whatever." You're like, can they do that?
Yeah, let's with Utopia though. They were like accepted by the mayor of San Francisco, though. So I mean, they did have some like government.
Do you think part of that's just humans going, just whatever? Just if you all stay over there, because you know what humans are like. They love segregating stuff. So like, yes, this is perfect. All the mutants in one place. You work away. Just don't come over to us. You stay in your lane, and we'll be fine.
So we got there's the Utopia and Dark Reign storyline where Scott and Emma once again kind of clash when he finds out that Emma's part of Norman Osborn's cabal, which was the evil version of the Illuminati. But she seemingly is kind of just there to keep an eye on it, though, because Emma's not terribly evil. She's just complicated.
But also, like, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, it was a great idea for them. Dark X-Men, I remember when they announced that book and I saw that team line up and I was like, oh, that's destined to fail. And it was like, yep, it was. That was her whole point. In canon, like, they were not supposed to succeed. We also have the Schism,
Mm-hmm.
which we have the real one there that's when Cyclops and Wolverine start to really break apart, which is always really interesting. I understand why they like to put Cyclops and Wolverine on opposite ends of the spectrum, because they are opposites of one another. But I almost feel like the more that Cyclops was becoming militant, the more I always thought Wolverine would have been like, hell yeah, because that was
Yeah,
Wolverine's whole deal, is
right.
doing the stuff that nobody wants to do. And then you got Scott Summers there going, yeah, no, he's right, we got to do the stuff nobody wants to do.
That's what I didn't understand about the schism. I didn't really fully read that whole thing, but like I didn't quite get what the schism between Wolverine and Cyclops would be, because like you said, it seems like if Cyclops is becoming more like militant and like willing to do that kind of stuff, exactly like you said, Wolverine knows that that's what it takes. Like that's, you got to do what you got to do. Like he knows this shit. That's been his thing. Unless the schism comes from Wolverine going, dude, that's my gimmick infringement. I'm going to sue you. Otherwise, like I don't see why they wouldn't agree with each other.
Well,
You know?
I think it was more a case of like Wolverine thinking Cyclops was better than becoming more like him. Like he was Xavier's first student. He should be following, Professor X's path and trying to bring everyone together, like man and mutant alike. But
I
instead,
under
then he's like, basically, I think the core disagreement for the schism was like Cyclops basically used some kids to kill people to protect Utopia when it was under attack.
Yeah,
And
he put out the young X-Men out there to help.
yeah,
Well, what fucking age were the X-Men whenever Xavier find them?
They're teenagers, because Iceman, there was I think like well into the run, Iceman turned 18.
but they weren't killing people back in the
No,
day.
they
though.
weren't killing people.
We
That was,
don't
I guess,
know.
Wolverine had an issue with Cyclops making children soldiers, but in that same breath, on X-Force, Wolverine's team consisted of X-23, who, yes, is a clone, but is a teenage girl, and Elixir, who also was a teenage boy.
Yep.
Mhm.
So that's a little fucked. No, I get it. I get it, but I also kind of saw it as like that was kind of the beginning of Wolverine they're changing Wolverine's characterization, because I kind of felt like it especially came out in the Wolverine and the X-Men comic that Jason Aaron did, of like Wolverine's now the headmaster of the school for gifted youngsters, and it's like that seems like a weird decision.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too.
And another thing about like Wolverine thinking that Cyclops should be better than that, like this is after Astonishing X-Men, when they found out that the Danger Room, the training thing they'd been using for years and years and years, was a sentient robot that Xavier was keeping held captive. So like at that point, like Cyclops has already been exposed to some of the hypocrisies of Charles Xavier's, dream of a better future.
Right.
So I don't necessarily fault Cyclops for, kind of going against some of that stuff. But yeah, no, Cyclops adopted the militant personality because of the decimation of the mutant population by 98%. There's less of them now. So like we got to do what we can to shore up.
Yeah. I mean, that again, if you're the kind of like the de facto leader of the X-Men and then you go through all that shit, like you can see why it would make them a little bit more hard-nosed,
Yeah.
It is kind of ironic, though, him becoming more like Magneto than Professor X.
That is true. I mean,
yeah,
that is part of it is because like Xavier himself is, like you said, he was doing some weird shit, and so Cyclops just kind of naturally turned away from that. But what I feel like that should have done was explain more about the Magneto Xavier split. You know what I mean? Because you could, if Cyclops, like Xavier's like most loyal student, is saying what kind of a bastard he really is and turning away from him, you can see why Magneto and Xavier would have had a long-standing rivalry for so long. But I don't think they really talked about that.
they didn't really too much to talk about. Like the core relationship between Xavier and Magneto is, I think, still very there for the taking. I feel like they've not done a lot of justice to do it, to explore that, oddly enough, considering they were like two of the first characters in the X-Men ever, and their whole disintegration of their relationship being a core aspect of their background.
Yeah, because
So
they made it like really blasé, like, oh, I fight for good and I fight for evil, you know, and you're like, is that really like the only fucking difference between these two guys? You know what I mean?
yeah, I really think that what they did with Wolverine was because he and Cyclops are always seen as rivals anyway, because Wolverine's totally not inappropriate, lusting over a married man's wife in front of him all the fucking time. So yeah, the friction was already there, and they just added that other component. Like, well, now they're philosophically, opposed, because Wolverine's like, we don't use child soldiers, and Cyclops is like, motherfucker, there's 200 of us. Who are we going to use then?
Yeah.
So we'll jump from that. The schism kind of ended up leading us into a series of events that happened where it was just all about putting the X-Men against people. So Avengers versus X-Men, where the Phoenix is returning to Earth, and it apparently seems like it's coming to use Hope as a host, and the Avengers and the heroes of the world have a problem with that. And Cyclops and the mutants are like, this is a mutant problem. We'll handle it like we've always handled it. And really, that was like the first time I think they ever really addressed how the X-Men and the rest of the Marvel hero community had been so separated. I think there's a line that Cyclops said to Captain America, like, you've always seen us as the ugly stepchildren. Like, we'll handle our shit. We can't trust you to be there for us because you've never been there for us. So, like, we'll take care of this and we'll take care of Hope. Now, if I'm not mistaken, at one point, isn't Wolverine like, wasn't he like going to kill Hope to keep that from happening?
Ooh, I don't remember.
I don't remember it either. It might be totally wrong on that one. Because, like, it's like you said, there's some aspects of like the Wolverine characterization where he had such a problem with Cyclops going more militant, than he would still do weird shit. So that led to the Phoenix arriving to take Hope, but instead take Cyclops and 4 other X-Men as hosts. So it becomes Cyclops, Colossus, Magic, Emma Frost, and Namor the Submariner, the first mutant. And makes them hosts for the Phoenix. And that culminated with Cyclops killing Xavier. The dream is dead. So, real quick, what were your thoughts on the Phoenix? I've seen it referred to as the Phoenix Force 5, because they came out dressed like kind of anime characters after the Phoenix took their bodies. But yeah, what were your opinions on the Phoenix Force stuff that happened with Avengers vs. X-Men, and the move to have Cyclops kill Xavier?
I didn't really read a lot of this because I kind of fell out with the X-Men over this whole period. But I didn't like the idea of the Avengers versus X-Men. Like you said earlier, it seems like a lot of like X-Men versus whoever. Like that just seemed to be the gimmick they were doing. I'm like, this is shitty writing. Like, it's just lazy. And then their constant need to bring back the Phoenix, like they just can't let that shit die. It's like, nope, here it comes again. And I get it. It's a Phoenix. It never dies. It always comes back. I get it. But also, we've done it a million times. What else can we do? You're getting silly. I didn't like the idea of the Phoenix 5. I'm like, what? Why? What are we doing? What? Why? I didn't like any. From what I heard about this book, I didn't like the sound of any of it. But I haven't read it, so I don't know if it is good. But it didn't sound good to me, which is why
I mean, I quite enjoyed it, to be honest. Like it did feel like this was the peak period where it seemed like almost all major Marvel events was the heroes against the heroes.
Yes.
But
this is around Civil War II, right?
Yeah, I think that came after this. But it set up some good things as well. Like Namor basically flooded Wakanda and started off a feud with Black Panther, which Jonathan Hickman picked up in his Avengers run.
too.
Yeah, that was great stuff. I think I said when we talked about it previously, that's like the first and only time that I've ever cared about Namor as a character. But yeah, this was interesting for Cyclops as well because, you know, he's fighting for mutant kind and doing all these things to kind of protect mutant kind, which maybe he wouldn't have done years and years ago. And then like the way it culminates as well, where all the other like Phoenix 5 get the Phoenix knocked out of them somehow, and all the power ends up coming into Cyclops. So he's the all-powerful one, but he can't control all that power, and so he's faced with Professor X, like trying to talk him down, and then he kills his mentor, and that's like the sort of come to Jesus moment where he finally realizes that, like, oh shit, maybe I am going too far here.
Murder is usually a good sign that you've gone too far.
And it led to some fun stuff as well, where afterwards he's like arrested and then busted out of jail by like Magneto and I think Magic and Emma Frost.
So that's the post where Wolverine and the X-Men are part of it, where they have opposing schools at that point.
Yeah.
So Cyclops starts the Charles Xavier school, and Wolverine starts the Jean Grey school, both to commemorate fallen people that they loved.
That's gotta be a real kick in the teeth for Cyclops again. It's like Wolverine's doing the Jean Grey one, you motherfucker.
Yeah.
This is my ex-wife. Thanks.
Just leave her alone.
Because that was actually part of the schism thing. There was he and Wolverine were having a fight, like a fight, and Cyclops like just looks at Wolverine and just says, "You know, she was always scared of you," just to rile him up. See, I kind of like that aspect of Cyclops. Like when he was like getting a little more militant, like he got ballsy. Like, oh, here's Wolverine, the guy with the healing factor, pops the knives out of his hands. Let me rile him up a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, we get Cyclops in this sort of revolutionary role where, you know, very famously Quentin Quire had the t-shirt that said Magneto was right, Cyclops was right, was starting to go around.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Bendis run of that, and I wasn't reading this because I just have a problem with Brian Michael Bendis, as it's well documented at this point.
Yep.
So that leads us to, I mean, there's Secret Wars, but you know, we don't need to. Secret Wars to me is so uninteresting, unless you guys want to talk about Secret Wars.
Nope.
Not really.
Okay, so then we have the Inhumans storyline, where the Inhumans start to release the Terrigen mists to create more Inhumans. Well, not to create more Inhumans, but to activate the Inhuman gene in them. So I guess as quick as possible to touch on the Inhumans. The Inhumans are characters that were like primitive humans that were experimented on by the Kree to develop weird powers. And in this Inhuman storyline, they released like the crystals that gave the Inhumans their powers. They released it in a cloud form to activate the dormant Inhuman gene that were in some humans on Earth. And like that's how we have Miss Marvel, for example. Mm-hmm. Which the reveal that she's a mutant now makes even less sense, because the Terrigen mist cloud thing kills mutants. Because like that was like the how they showed Cyclops dying. Because he died. He was impacted by the Terrigen mist cloud, and it killed him, because that's what it did to mutants. So at that point, we get the time-displaced X-Men, which we've talked about before with the other episodes, where we get a young Cyclops coming in. And this is the Cyclops that's he's like 16 years old. He's the leader of this X-Men team. And he comes to the future, and he finds out, A, he's dead, B, he killed Xavier, and C, he's like the most hated mutant on the Earth. Bit of a jump for him. Like Beast shows up and he's like, "Oh, I have blue fur." And Angel shows up and he's like, "Oh, I think I'm actually an angel now." And Iceman shows up and he's like, "Oh, I guess I'm gay."
I
I
guess.
get that surprise thrown at me.
Oops.
So Cyclops shows up, and I think he has a rougher time for it. Because at one point, Wolverine straight up pops his claws in front of him and is like, "I could kill him right now and stop all this shit from happening." So Wolverine, who doesn't want to have child soldiers, straight up threatens a 16-year-old boy to kill him for stuff he hasn't done yet.
See, it doesn't make any sense.
No, it's a thing. So we get some young Cyclops adventures. Ultimately, he's like he kind of becomes obsessed with this idea of not becoming the person that he ended up being. He ends up ending his relation. Like he and Jean Grey split up in their teenage selves. He starts dating X-23, which I imagine is fucking weird for everybody there to be like, "Oh yeah, you guys hate each other," and like, "Oh, the young version of Cyclops is dating the clone of you." That's weird. He goes into space, and there was a great 12-issue run of Cyclops in space with his dad. So I thought that I actually did read that. And I thought it was a fun storyline of, because he lost his dad when he was a kid, so he gets to spend time with his dad as a space pirate. And eventually he gets sent back through time, and regular Cyclops gets resurrected by Cable, but a young version of Cable, because time travel. And when he gets resurrected, it's during the time that X-Man, who is another clone of him, that's like, X-Man is created from the DNA of Cyclops and Jean Grey by Mr. Sinister. And it's in an alternate timeline, if I'm not mistaken, John.
I believe so. I think it was
Another dimension?
was that the Age of Apocalypse?
No, I don't think X-Man was Age of Apocalypse.
Nate Gray was Age of Apocalypse.
Oh, Nate Gray was Age of Apocalypse. Okay.
Yeah.
But they called him X-Man, so I don't know if it's the same character.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the same character. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I need to read that X-Man run that they did in the 90s, because it's always a character I've been interested in because of just how strange an idea that was. So that, X-Man has basically rewritten reality and removed the X-Men from it, but Cyclops wasn't included in that, so like the mutant population is even less than normal, and that's a whole fucked up series, and it ends with him getting reunited with Jean Grey, who had also been resurrected, and leads right into Krakoa, where we currently are. So, anything we need to touch on from that period of time?
I don't know. I'm really confused about that whole Nick Gray, like, alternate universe stuff. I don't quite know what went on there.
Well, so Nate Gray came from the Age of Apocalypse. He got abandoned in the current timeline, though.
Yes.
So, like, there is a Nate Gray series that takes place in the 616.
Maybe we should save this for the Nate Gray episode.
Yeah, we'll do a Nate Gray episode. I actually, like I said, I really do kind of enjoy this character.
Yes, I like him.
Space hippie kind of thing.
Yeah. Because they did this thing in the 90s. Sorry, we will save this for the Nate Gray episode. But they did this thing in the 90s where, like, he was kind of like a reluctant messiah,
Yes.
Because he was so powerful. Everybody was like, oh, look at it. He can do whatever he wants. And he just didn't really want to do any of that, which I really thought was a good angle,
It is a good angle.
Anyway.
So, John, anything you want to touch on from that period of time before we head into Krakoa?
Not really. Like, I wasn't a big fan of the X-Men books around this time. The whole storyline with Nate Gray, like, transforming the world and stuff. It didn't work for me.
That was like the third time since the 90s they did an alternate timeline storyline, though, too. Because I remember there was like an alternate, I can't remember what caused it, but there was like this alternate reality where Cyclops' name was Basilisk, and he had a relationship with Frenzy, but his like main goal was he was like held hostage and used as a death sentence variety. Like mutants would get like strapped down to a chair in front of him, and his visor would open involuntarily and just kill the person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and Gambit was a sniper who would use his kinetic abilities to charge the bullets before he fired them. I always thought that was interesting.
Was that was the Age of X, wasn't it?
No, I don't think it was Age of X.
Oh,
I don't think it was. I think Age of X was the Nate Gray stuff.
okay.
I don't think this was the same thing. Regardless, we'll hop into Krakoa. So Krakoa, every X-Men has been resurrected. Everything's great. We got an island that's ours. We're our own sovereign nation. Xavier's here. He's doing great. He's got a big orb on his head that's Cerebro. He's still one of the weirdest character designs I've ever seen in my entire life. Just Xavier walking around in like a black onesie with a giant metal orb on his head. What a look. But anyway, Cyclops' role originally, he's on the Quiet Council, which is sort of the governing body. He ends up stepping down so he could focus as being team leader for the X-Men. The big story arc that he has there was that he was killed in public, and at that point, the general population did not know that mutants had figured out resurrection. So he died in public, so they just straight up acted like Cyclops died, and when they resurrected him, they created a new persona for him, and he was Captain Krakoa for a period of time. It was very short-lived, and that's really all that he did, because I feel like that X-Men book was more about Sync than anybody else.
How did he die?
He got he got hit by a car.
that killed Cyclops, but it didn't kill Darby Allin.
He got hit by a bus. That's the difference. Buses notoriously weaker than cars.
I don't know if that's how the hierarchy of vehicles work. John, do you know how he dies?
I can't remember.
Because you would think it's going to be something pretty big. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah. He's not going to go out like a chump, surely.
Right. Like, it would be really stupid if he just like tripped over something.
Yep. So where we are now is the last time I kind of dropped off the X-Men books, and the last thing that I was at was Cyclops being held by Orcus, and his eyes are stitched shut, and there's a bomb planted to him. If they tried to move him, it would blow up and kill him.
How did they stitch his eyes shut?
Using ruby quartz thread, by the looks of it.
But if they take his glasses off, try to stitch them shut, they would have to be open at some point. You know what I mean? Doesn't that seem like a really stupid? I wouldn't be who wants to stitch Cyclops' eyes shut? I ain't going anywhere near those fucking eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You kidding me? You'll kill me. No fucking way. Plus, like you said, we don't have the right thread. We gotta go out and we gotta go to our ruby quartz guy and see if he can turn this sunglasses shit into thread.
But anyway, that's our comics history on Cyclops. Do you have any thoughts before I go into the various accolades that he has, as well as just some general fun facts?
Like 2008 King of the Ring.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done a pretty good job of talking about Cyclops. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of years to go on. He's the most consistently used X-Men character.
Yeah.
But I also think that he wasn't, to my point, he wasn't always that interesting for a lot of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, like I said, it's that issue with the whole team book thing. You can only focus on some characters for so long, and they needed a de facto leader character. Throw him in.
Yeah, but he did fine. He was grand. Yeah. I think we covered a lot of the points pretty accurately.
Yeah, I'd say at least compared to some of the other characters we've talked about in this X-Men run, he's actually had some character progression as well.
Yeah,
starting off as sort of a dweeb and kind of teacher's pet, and really awkward, and growing into a leader, and then becoming a bit more extreme when tragedy strikes, and then sort of finding his way back again. So he's done a lot, and
becoming Captain Krakoa.
Of course, the most important part of his history.
One of the biggest
Well, then somebody stole the Captain Krakoa costume and posed as Captain Krakoa in the Uncanny Avengers miniseries, and it was revealed to be the evil Steve Rogers.
Of course.
So anyway, here's some
let's just ignore all that shit.
Yeah. So we'll hit some fun facts about Cyclops. So Cyclops has two brothers, maybe three. The first brother is Havoc, and then Dylan's favorite character, Vulcan. Havoc is the brother that was with him when they jumped out of the airplane, and Havoc would later on be like the leader of X Factor, was a member of the X-Men with his brother. Last time I saw him, he was a zombie kind of guy that was working with Madeline Pryor in Dark X-Men, and now he's going to be in the X Factor comic that's being led by Angel. His other brother, Vulcan, who, if I'm not mistaken, his mom was pregnant with Vulcan when they were abducted by the Shi'ar.
Mm-hmm.
So they never met his brother.
That's correct.
And he was a villain, and then they resurrected him, and he was in like 2 comics and Hickman's stuff, and like they focused on like his weird family dynamic because he doesn't know his brothers but lives with them.
I think he was artificially aged by the Shi'ar as well.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, but so. I don't remember how he got back to Earth though. That's the weird thing.
The other brother that may or may not be is Adam Extreme, who they had they had this comic series called X-Men Legends that were reuniting like creative teams for certain periods of time to like, hey, tell a story that you never got to tell. And this one particular creative team apparently had always planned that Adam Extreme, who is the most 90s character one can be, is actually a Summers brother. And they find out because his power of making people's blood boil inside of their veins doesn't affect Cyclops or Havoc.
What a useful power to have.
Yeah, right. And he also has the power to wear a baseball cap backwards and throw knives like a cool guy. Other things. Of course, Mr. Sinister being obsessed with Scott Summers' bloodline. That's well established. He has so many fucking clone children or children from alternate futures because, like, you have Cable, you have Nate Gray, you have Rachel Summers. Peter David introduced Ruby Summers in the X Factor comic, where it's apparent that she's like a daughter he had with Emma Frost because she has the ability to turn her body into Ruby. Let's see. He's been in a couple of the movies, all of the cartoons. His original name was Slim for about 2 issues before they changed it to Scott, and Slim became a nickname they would use.
Mm-hmm.
Good old Slim Summers. And the differences between the Madeline Pryor characters. So I talked about this with John before we started recording, but Chris Claremont created Madeline Pryor for Scott to retire with. And Louise Simonson, who was part of the creative team for X Factor, the book that Cyclops unretired and led, stated that she was just always a placeholder for Jean Grey in his life, which I don't know. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I married this woman that looks like my ex-wife because I can't be with my ex-wife, so she'll have to do. So here's some other interesting things about Scott Summers. Like Iceman, there is a series of lists that he was a part of. So, would you like to hear where Scott Summers ranks?
15th.
Hang on, ranks in terms of what though?
A series of lists.
Okay.
In 2011, in 2011, Comic Book Resources voted Cyclops as number 9 in the top Marvel characters. And I don't know if it was just that particular year or just in general. In 2006, IGN ranked Cyclops as first in their top 25 X-Men list. That's bold. I like him, but first? Interesting. 2008, Wizard magazine ranked Cyclops 106 in their 200 greatest comic book characters of all time list.
Pretty far down.
Right? But I mean, it is greatest comic book characters of all time, so it seems like they're taking like almost 100 years of history and multiple publishers into effect as well.
Yeah, at least he made the list.
Macy made the list. 2011, IGN ranked Cyclops 39 in their top 100 comic book characters.
That's pretty good.
2014, Entertainment Weekly ranked Cyclops the second in their Let's Rank Every X-Men Ever list.
Second.
Second.
That's
Also in
silly.
2014, BuzzFeed ranked Cyclops first in their 95 X-Men members ranked from worst to best. Now, I don't know if he's first as in the worst or first as in the best. It did not clarify on that.
I wouldn't listen to BuzzFeed anyway. What do they know?
What do they know? In 2019, comicbook.com ranked Cyclops 25 in their 50 most important superheroes ever list.
Wow.
Right in the middle. 2021, CBR ranked Cyclops 4th in their 10 bravest mutants in Marvel Comics list. In 2022, the AV Club ranked Cyclops 72nd in their top 100 best Marvel characters list. And the most recent one in 2022, Newsarama ranked Cyclops 3rd in their best X-Men members of all time list. So kind of high ranking considering his powers are basically just the I-beams. What's interesting about the I-beams is I have seen so many variations on how strong they are to a point that it doesn't make a lot of sense. So the same ability, like there's a very kind of famous moment in one of the comics where there's a Sentinel approaching and Cyclops is fed up with it, so he just takes the visor off entirely and just hits the thing full blast, and it like destroys the Sentinel and incinerates a good portion of like the yard. So it's like very powerful, but it's also has the ability to bounce off of objects, and I don't know how you control that. Because I've seen like the way the visor works is the visor will lift or like close, so he can like lift it partially if he wants like a more fine controlled beam. But I don't know how you control whether or not this is hard enough to punch through a steel wall or not hard enough that it won't bounce off a bunch of different surfaces to do cool trick shots.
Right. See, this is why you're not Cyclops. He does understand. He knows exactly how to do it. You know, didn't they say that? Okay, you can cut this bit out if this is incorrect. I was pretty sure that I read this somewhere, but like they were like, how does Cyclops generate his laser powers?
Yeah.
And they're like, it just comes from a different dimension.
Yes, I have seen that. I've seen that. I've seen solar power.
I was gonna say solar power.
Yeah, I've seen solar power, and I've seen metabolizes sunlight and other ambient energy, similar to how his brother metabolizes cosmic radiation.
Right.
And then it says, this is the 1983 official handbook of the Marvel Universe. Cyclops' eyes contain interdimensional apertures, releasing powerful energies from another dimension into his own via the beams.
Via the beams.
So the Flash can vibrate. The Flash can vibrate his eyes fast enough that he can see other wavelengths of light, whereas Cyclops' eyeballs seem to have little portals in them that bring other dimensional energy out.
That's what doesn't make any sense, because like I get the solar energy business, because like it does relate to Havoc, who is like able to absorb like cosmic energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or something. I think that's what it is. So like that makes sense to keep that continuity together with the brothers, but then to just be like, no, his beams come from a different dimension. Like that doesn't.
This is 83, so this is well in the Claremont run too, where that example was given. That was a choice.
But like that doesn't even like. That's not even close to like how anything works. What the fuck? I don't know, man. That's a weird one.
I'm sure there's one point where he had his eye like plucked out. So like if that's the case, like if it's like just a hole to another dimension, like how are you plucking that out?
Yeah, like
no. The other dimension is inside of the eye.
It's in his
eye. As long
eye.
as the eyeball's not punctured. If they just straight up pull his eyeball out and he's got like the most unpleasant jawbreaker in the world, then like you're fine.
So okay, I'm very confused.
It's okay. It seems like this wasn't well thought out and they just like ignore it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it seems pretty stupid.
So the other thing about it is I learned this. I always knew that because of the X-Men cartoon, when Cyclops was using the I-beams, he would like tap a button on the side of the visor.
Yeah.
Turns out he also has buttons in the gloves of his costume.
What?
Yes.
Didn't
Why?
realize that. Well, so he can fire him off just by squeezing his hand. So have you ever noticed that like a lot of the time when he's depicted like shooting the I-beams, he's got like a fist clenched?
Okay.
So like the fist clench has like whatever wires or whatever running up into the visor that opens it.
So why does he touch it then?
I don't know, Dylan, why do you touch it?
I don't know. I've never met him. I've never touched Cyclops. Put that on the record.
On the record, it's in writing, audibly. So, so yeah, those, like I said, those are just kind of little factoids. We know that he's been in the movies. We've talked about the X-Men movies. So he was played by James Marsden. He was played by an actor in the X-Men Origins Wolverine. He was played by the kid who's in Ready Player One in the more recent X-Men movies. He was in the X-Men cartoon. He was in X-Men 97. There was a short-lived cartoon on Nickelodeon before the Disney purchase went through called Wolverine and the X-Men, and he was a member of that group. He wasn't the leader, though. Wolverine was the leader of that team, that's another one of those like weird sanitizing of Wolverine that they were doing at the time, where it was like Xavier was dying and he was like, Wolverine, I need you to lead the X-Men, even though you're a cold-blooded killer with amnesia. That seems like a terrible idea, but okay. What else was there? There was X-Men Evolution, which was a cartoon that featured some of the X-Men as teenagers that attended a regular high school while still being X-Men. And Cyclops was a teenager on that show. Yet Storm and Wolverine were not. That's worth looking. Have you ever heard of X-Men Evolution, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I've watched it though.
That could potentially be a watch along worthy thing because they made some fucking choices on that cartoon. It's very popular amongst a certain subset of fans. But I remember watching it and just being like, so Storm's a teacher and Wolverine's a teacher, but Cyclops and Jean Grey and Nightcrawler and such are students, which makes the whole, like, if you know the Wolverine Jean Grey thing, that's even creepier. Yeah.
Yeah, but he won't use kids as soldiers though, so that's good.
Fuck that kid.
He's trying to.
So anyway, so yeah, he's always had a very big role in the other aspects of it. I mean, he was in Marvel vs. Capcom, the Marvel Ultimate Alliance video games. He's a playable character. So yeah, Cyclops has always been around. He's always getting used. Even if he doesn't become a focus of like a particular storyline, the potential is there for him to be one. And because of that stuff, like, you know, his questionable relationship things that he does and taking on the more militant approach, I do feel like he's a more complex character than a Captain America, to be frank.
Yeah.
I mean, Captain America is, you know, always does the right thing at the right time kind of guy, and you got Cyclops who's, you know, authorizing child soldiers and fucking around on his wife.
Shooting his mentor or whatever.
Did he shoot the mentor or did he break his neck? I can't ever remember.
I don't know. He killed him somehow.
John, how did Cyclops kill him?
I think he just blasted him with the Phoenix Force.
Oh, I got hit by a car. Okay.
Do you think that was awkward whenever Xavier came back?
Well, so all right, here's the thing, and we'll this might be an aside. We might do one day just do a Krakoa episode because there are a lot of, like, I love Hickman. I think Hickman's phenomenal. I don't think they tied Krakoa into the rest of the comics very well because I think there's some really hand-wavy stuff that happened that all has to do with Moira. So we might edit this out, but so Moira is revealed as a mutant who every time she dies, she is born again and resets the timeline essentially. So it seems like Xavier never died with Utopia and Krakoa.
Oh.
Because she goes to Xavier and Magneto and is like, hey, this is like, I've lived and died this many times. Go ahead and read my mind and you'll see. And every time that like we try to do something, it goes very poorly. So like this is the best case scenario and this is what you should be doing. So like that's the House of X, Powers of X series in a nutshell, right, John?
I'm not sure.
Oops.
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's just very, it doesn't seem to address this. So I don't know if any of those things that we just talked about were continuity or not.
Well, the thing is, like, Professor X seems to have died like a few times.
Yes.
I don't know how you can scrub that from continuity, because that was like major.
There's always major stuff when Xavier
Yeah.
dies.
Like the consequences, the fallout from that is, like we've talked about, is like a big part of Cyclops' story, like him going off the rails and stuff. So yeah, I don't know how it all fits together.
Yeah, it seems some like real X-Men bullshit right there, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So that kind of leads to the next thing. So obviously, I don't know if we're good with tying. We're gonna put a bow on Cyclops. It's really hard to like put a definitive bow on him like we could the others, because Beast and Angel and Iceman don't get a ton of development, and like the level of their involvement in the series fluctuates. You can't really put a bow on Cyclops because like already we know he's going to be leading the next team after the current Krakoa stuff wraps up. And so far what we're seeing is there's been a lot of editorial mandating on that. So that's going to, like, if we do decide to do a Krakoa episode, that's going to be fucking wild to talk about.
Mhm.
All of the editorial fucking around with it, like very similar to the Clone Saga.
Yeah, that'll take like 3 episodes.
Yeah, it might be. But so if we're going to like put a bow on Cyclops, then obviously our very next episode we're going to be doing on this in maybe a few episodes, maybe a month or two or so from now, we'll touch on Jean Grey. And after that, I mean, does it make sense to do Xavier and Magneto?
I think at some point we'll probably have to do them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the other prominent characters that were in X-Men #1.
Mm-hmm.
I do kind of like this, though. I kind of like, after we do that, should we like, just build from there? Like we do Havoc and Polaris because they join the X-Men later on, and then we'll do like the Claremont X-Men teams.
Are we going
It'd
to
be
talk
fun.
about every X-Men?
Yes.
Okay.
We're
Even El Guapo?
Yeah, we'll talk about El Guapo.
Yes.
We'll talk about what was his name? The guy whose power was used blue.
Jazz?
Jazz. We'll talk about Jazz.
I think his name was Jazz.
Have we officially
an
become
hour
an
and a
X-Men
half
podcast now?
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
can we? Yeah, I think we should
We need to
definitely
start.
do something
We need
else.
to branch out a little bit more, because
We've been talking about the X-Men a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If we're looking at our past episodes, we did the X-Men movie. We did the watch along with Generation X. Yeah, so Generation X watch along, then we did Ben Reilly, then X-Men movies, then overrated characters, which X-Men got involved in on that one. I'm sure we did. We talked about X-Men in the initial Talk About Whatever We Want. I think we talked about it in the last Talk Whatever We Want. We talk about X-Men a lot.
Well, there's a lot of them.
There is.
Makes sense. But
yeah,
next episode we'll talk about something completely different.
Yes. I don't know if we know what that is yet, but we'll get there.
Psych.
X-Force.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll still talk about X-Men, but they don't know it. They don't know. They'll have
Exactly.
to check the episode out.
There you go.
But don't put
I'll
this
have you
bit in
guys-
so that they hear me saying that, because that'll give the game
We'll
away.
have you guys talk about the Flash family some more.
Let's go back to the talk about X-Men.
All right, everybody. Well, I've been Corey, and this is John and Dylan. We're gonna call it. We'll call it an episode on that one. Thanks for joining us as we break down Cyclops. Leave comments, follow us on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you think about Cyclops. Whether or not you agree with John and I that there's a lot more to him than just standard boring leader guy, or if you agree with Dylan that he's just standard boring leader
He's a
guy.
big stupid idiot. Put it in the
Yeah.
comments.
I will say also, we didn't touch on this real quick, but I do remember there was a storyline where Psylocke was trying to seduce him in the 90s. And I don't know what it is about Scott Summers and telepaths, but they are all about him.
They can read his mind and like he's up to something.
Oh, they know all his dirty
Something
thoughts. They're like,
sexy.
oh, he's a freak.
Yeah, they're like he knows how to party. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They
knows how
know.
to please a woman.
Party self.
All right. On that note, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.